Hey, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be teaching you how to install Arch Linux onto VirtualBox. If you're following along, trying to install it on your PC or computer, it might be a little bit different. You might have to look at the installation guides, and it might be a little bit different, but you could follow along for now. So head on over to archlinux.org/download and get that Arch ISO file. Okay, download that, and then for now I'm going to be following the installation guide. And I'm going to be teaching you how to install it for UEFI systems. If you're trying to install for a BIOS system, you can still follow along, but the steps will be a little bit different. So you might have to Google some steps. So first, I'm going to make a new machine. I'm going to call this Arch. Give it some memory. Create virtual hard disk now. VirtualBox disk image, dynamically allocated, and I'll give it a good chunk of memory. Say like 40 gigs. Alright, so now we have a new machine, and since I'm going to be teaching how to install on a UEFI system, go to Settings on your VirtualBox Manager, System, and then Enable EFI, and that's gonna enable this all the systems for you. So yeah, so all we have to do is start it, and then we'll select my ISO and boot it up. Click Start. Okay, so then it's going to say Arch Linux install medium, and then we'll just click enter. Gonna boot up, give it a minute. Alright, so now we are booted into the live version of Arch, or the ISO. Okay, so to start off, if you need to connect to a network, if you're on a laptop or a computer or PC, I'd recommend using IWD or IWCTL, and you could look through this. I'll link this in the description. Just install it through pacman, or it actually should automatically be installed through the live version, and then you could connect to a network there. It's a nice network manager, and we'll install that for the actual system later. But for now, let's get started. So first, I'm going to actually update the keys. So the GBG keys. So you could either verify all the signatures here, and then run that pacman-key, or what I like to do is do pacman-sy, and then arch linux-key ring, and that should update all the signatures for all the packages and everything, so you won't run into any issues. Okay, so now we're actually going to start partitioning the disk. So we could skip the console keyboard layout, connect to internet, and then, alright, so here we're going to partition the disks. So with a BIOS system, the partitions are going to be a little bit different. You don't need to do a EFI system partition, but right now I'm doing a UEFI system installation guide, so I'm going to do the whole partitioning of that. So let's get started. So I'm going to use LSBLK, and that's going to show me the disk. So we have 45.3 gigabytes of data on the SDA, disk. So all we have to do, I'm going to use CG disk to partition my disk. So we'll do CG disk/dev/SDA, because that's what we want to partition. Click enter, enter. Okay, so now we have 45.3 gigs of space. So as you can see, you can navigate with your arrow keys, but for now you're just going to click new. And this is going to be our EFI partition, EFI system partition. So we're going to make this at least 300 megabytes. So I'll give it like 500 M for megabytes, and then press enter. And then the hex code for the EFI system. I don't know that, so just type L, and then you could find the code by typing EFI, and then it should be, yeah, so EF00, that's going to be the code. So we're going to type EF00. There we go, and then we're going to call this boot. Okay, so EFI system partition, and that's boot. Okay, so then you're going to navigate down to free space, and we're going to click new, and now we're going to make a swap partition. So we're going to just press enter on that first one. We're going to make this 1 gigabyte, make it at least what it says, 512 megabytes. But yeah, so I'm just going to give it 1 gigabyte. So press enter, and then we're going to do L again to get the code, and then all you're going to do is look up swap. And then, so Linux swap, the code is 8200. I'm going to put 8200, press enter, and the name is going to be called swap. So now we've created our new swap partition. Okay, so now we're going to go back down to free space, and we're going to make one more partition. This is going to be a root partition. So you can press, we're going to give it the rest of the free space. So you just press enter, enter, and then the Linux file system code is 8300 or 8300, and then the partition name will be Arch. We'll name it Arch for now. Okay, so now you could use your arrow keys to go over and click write. Press enter on write, and it's going to ask you if, are you sure? Yes. Okay, so now it successfully wrote the partitions, so now we could quit. And now we're going to configure and format the partitions. So, right, so for our root partition, it wants a ext4 file system. So to do that, you'll do mkfs.ext4/dev, and then your root partition name. So to find your root partition name, you could also do lsblk, and there's the names under SDA. So SDA1, that's going to be our EFI system partition. SDA2, that's the swap partition. SDA3, that's our root partition. So we're going to configure our root partition first by saying mkfs.ext4/dev/SDA3. Press enter. Okay, now we're going to configure our swap partitions. So make swap/dev/SDA2, which is my swap partition. Press enter. And then you don't have to follow this if you're on a BIOS system. Like I said, you don't need the EFI system partition if you're in a BIOS system. But it wants us to make a FAT32 file system on that partition, so we'll do mkfs.fat-f32/dev/SDA1, which is my EFI system partition. Press enter. Okay, so now all we have to do is mount the file system to the /mant. So mount/dev/SDA3, which is a root partition, and then /mount/mnt. Press enter. So now we configured /mnt's to our partition. Now all we have to do is mount our EFI partition, system partition to mount/boot. So what we're going to do is do make directory /mount/boot. Press enter, and now we could say mount/dev/SDA1, which is the EFI system partition, and then the directory that we just made. So mount/boot or mnt. And press enter. Okay, and then we just have to enable our swap. We just have to enable our swap partition by saying swap on /dev/SDA2, which specifies the swap partition. So now we're done with that. Now we're going to install the necessary packages. So this is going to actually install it to the system. So it's going to ask for base Linux Linux firmware. I'm also going to add some packages that could help out. So pacstrap slash mnt base linux linux dash firmware, and then we're going to install some packages like IWD. So IWCTL, that's like the network manager I was talking about. It's really helpful for connecting to Wi-Fi. And then we could do sudo, and then we'll add some editors like V and Nano. Press enter, and that will start installing all the packages. And hopefully if you updated your signatures for the packages, it should work. If not, if you get an error, go update it, go install the right signatures, and then redo this command. So yeah, so right now, just waiting on it to install all the necessary files and packages. Okay. And we're done. So it was successful. Okay, so now we just have to make a file table, like little command right here. So we're generating one, so type clear. So it's gen f stab dash u slash mnt, and then we'll just look at the output. So right now SDA3, that's our root partition. That's a ext4 file system. We have SDA1, which is our boot part or EFI system partition, and then we have SDA2, which is our swap partition. So yeah, that looks good. So we'll run that command, and then we'll type little 2 brackets, and we'll say /mount /etc/fstab. So that configures the whole partitions for you in system. Okay, so now if you've been following along, if you ran into some errors, you could look it up on Google. Especially on these commands, if you don't understand what's happening, you could always Google them and get a little bit more clarity. But for now, all you have to do is test arch-shroot and then /mnt and press enter. And now you're actually in the Arch system itself. So congratulations. The final step is to just set up a bootloader, and we're gonna set up Grub. Grub works on biosystems and UEFI systems. You could also see if like all your packages were correctly installed. Like Nano, we installed that, or IWCTL. Okay, yep. But first we're gonna set up a password for the root user or root. So to set up a password, type passwd, and then I'll just set it to root. Okay, so now the root password is literally just root. Okay, you want to make sure you want to set up a password before you restart, or else you're not going to be able to log in. Okay, so now all we have to do is follow the grub installation. Scroll down. So we have to install the grub package and the EFI boot manager package. So to do that, you type pacman, which is our package manager for Arch Linux, -sy grub and then EFI boot mgr, and press enter. Yes, it should install all of that. Okay, perfect. So now we just have to follow this command right there. So it's gonna be grub dash dash install and then dash target equals x86 underscore 64 dash EFI, and then dash EFI dash directory equals. So the EFI directory should be /boot, even though on documentation, the documentation it says ESP. Just put it as /boot. It should work perfectly fine. If not, you could always Google that. And then we're gonna do dash bootloader dash ID equals all uppercase grub. And yeah, so installed, no error reported. And then we're just gonna make a configuration file. And that's gonna be grub dash make config dash o slash boot slash grub slash grub.cfg. Alright, and you're literally done. So now we could clear that, and then we could go and exit. So now we're actually in the Arch ISO, and then we'll restart, and if it works, then we know we haven't ran into any errors, and you actually installed Arch. So we'll do shutdown tac R now. Press enter. And as you can see, we have the grub bootloader. This is good because that means you set up grub correctly. Then it's gonna run through, and there you go. So you have your Arch Linux login. So I'm gonna log in as root. Oops, being slow. What the hell? And then root. Okay, so now you're actually in your system. So congratulations. Like I said, if you need to connect to Wi-Fi, you could use IWCTL. That's what I personally use. But yeah, you're in your system, and now you could set up your own kernel. So the kernel this is using is Arch, so the Arch kernel, default Arch kernel. If you wanted to change your kernel, you could go to this link. I'll link it in the description. I'd recommend Linux Zen because it's a nice kernel. But yeah, congratulations, guys! You successfully installed Arch Linux on your computer or VirtualBox.